Hey guys, Drew Danger here again, and putting out this video to talk about, since we're getting to know me, I thought it would be a good time to talk about another subject, which is what is my favorite movie and why? But more importantly, we're going to be doing a breakdown discussion about this film. As you can see, I'm representing Empire Strikes Back. So, as you guys guessed, my favorite movie is The Empire Strikes Back, non special edition. And let me get into that for a second. For you guys that are new to Star Wars or don't know everything that goes on with it, I am old enough where I grew up with the original trilogy before the special edition. I was actually in junior high when the special edition had come out. So I was used to just the original cut films, um, which is kind of a little bit of a scandal because if you guys know anything about Star Wars, George Lucas refuses to release those. He only did it once, and it was a Laserdisc run, but he didn't do a big promotion for it. It was a set that was out for less than a year. Um, and it had a bonus disc, and the bonus disc ended up being the original cuts Laserdisc version, which they did not clean up or make special or anything like that, which is really a tragedy because Star Wars is considered to be one of the greatest film sagas of all time, but the Library of Congress doesn't even have it. True story. If you watch The People versus George Lucas, you'll also hear that George Lucas was invited to bring the original three films to the Library of Congress, and he was denied by the Library of Congress because he brought the special edition movies. The reason I'm talking about the special editions is because he went back years later in the 90s and added in CGI and extra footage that all of it pretty much was not original footage. There was a few pieces that could be considered original footage, but very, very little of that was actually shot in either 77, 80, or 83. It was all new footage that they ended up working for the movie, which is really sad that you don't have an option. And I'm here to tell you guys, if you guys ever do a movie, do it like the best person I can think of is Ridley Scott or Francis Ford Coppola, another one who put out all their versions of their films, and just said, you guys pick which version you like. James Cameron also did the same. He had the theatrical cut, the special edition cut, you know, you get to pick which one you want to watch. But with Star Wars, you do not have that option, just to let you guys know for those of you that do not understand that or don't know. So going forward, Empire Strikes Back, favorite movie of all time. The movie changed my life. Of course, I love the original film. I don't call it A New Hope. That's actually something that they added on years later. When Star Wars first came out, the original movie, it was just called Star Wars. If you read the book, it was called Star Wars, the Luke Skywalker story. So you could get into a debate about that, between the two. But the movie was just called Star Wars. But anyway, I love that film to death. But when I saw Empire Strikes Back, it was actually my first Star Wars movie. I saw it in 1986. My cousin that I'm really close to, who's a lot older than I am, grew up when the original film had come out, and I used to stay over at my aunt's house, my mom's sister, and she would let me watch the Robin Williams Popeye movie. Well, one day she went somewhere, I don't know, bathroom or something, and it was still going. And when I was watching the credits, it cut out because, it was a recorded tape, and it cut into The Empire Strikes Back. And I had never seen it. And my cousin's like, do you know what Star Wars is? I was like, I've heard of it, but I hadn't seen it yet. He said, well, let's watch Empire Strikes Back. And I watched that movie, and it just blew the walls off everything for me. It introduced me to science fiction. From there, I went looking for the original Battlestar Galactica, Buck Rogers, Tron, Last Starfighter. um, Flash Gordon. All those movies at that time, they were playing a lot on KTLA Channel 5 because I'm from Southern California. So they played that a lot on Southern California KTLA Channel 5 as well as Channel 9. Um, USA did some things. TBS and TNT had that as well as, HBO and things like that. But those networks, man, they played those movies a lot back then. So I saw those movies and they really kind of changed my life. But Empire Strikes Back is the reason um, all this was even possible for me to get started into the world of science fiction, which, as you know, custom action figures, um, model building, because I actually did work on a few science fiction projects and films, and I built spaceship models and things of that nature, and that's all thanks to the original Star Wars movies. Um, on a side note, I am not a fan of the Star Wars prequels, Episode One, Two, and Three. I've never been a fan of that. I did enjoy Rogue One. I thought that was really good. I thought Solo was okay. Um, it could have been completely different. There were some things I did and didn't like about it, but it wasn't all the way bad. Um, they could have made it better, sure, but um, I'm not also a fan of the Disney trilogy 7, 8, and 9. For you guys that may or may not know, there were what am I thinking? I'm sorry, blank moment. Um, books, which I started to read from the very beginning of when they came out, pretty much. In the early 90s, they started to make the expanded universe stories, and they continued on the adventures after Return of the Jedi. It was a few years after Return of the Jedi, but they wrote hundreds, thousands, millions of these books, and you went through everything. So, you went through a whole series of stuff, and the books were a lot better than what they ended up doing for the movies, and we were used to having that. And then so when Disney bought it and then decided to change the game on that, like it was kind of a shock because they had a really good story arc. They could have worked quite a few stories in that. They could have done the main cast when they were younger. They could have done the main cast when they were older because they had a lot of really cool stories in that time. Um, so let's get into Empire Strikes Back, not to get completely sidetracked, but let's get into it. So Empire Strikes Back came out in 1980. Uh, in the summer of May, and it was the sequel to the original Star Wars, and it was very different movie. I'm going to tell you why, because it was groundbreaking, because a lot of movies did not have the guts that Empire Strikes Back did. Whether if you like Star Wars or not, just hear me out on this. Star Wars Empire Strikes Back was one of the groundbreaking first films that allowed the good guys to completely just about lose the battle the entire film. So not only did the good guys lose, but they went through some struggles individually. They got tortured. Luke Skywalker lost his hand. Sorry, spoilers. If you've never seen Empire, I'm sorry. I'm talking about it. That's just too bad. Turn away now. But yeah, Luke Skywalker loses his hand, finds out Darth Vader's his father, and a lot changes in this movie because you think of the fun adventure with a little epic tale going on, and then you get down to Empire Strikes Back, you're all like, oh my gosh, this movie's insane. Like, the good guys are completely losing and they're on the run. Everything that could go wrong on the wrong day is happening in Empire. The Millennium Falcon's broken. Um, the weapon system is off. By the way, they don't explain that in the movie, but in the book they explain it. They show it in the movie, but you don't really know what's going on. There's a part where Han Solo, Harrison Ford, tells Chewbacca on Echo Base in the snow, uh, why'd you take those apart? Put those back together right now. Right before 3PO comes over and asks him about Luke Skywalker. When Princess Leia sent C3PO over. If you remember that part, you'll see one of the bottom guns for the Falcon, the bottom main gun, is down, and you're not really thinking about it. But in the book, they explain, because the movie doesn't get into it in depth, but what happened was, because like most of us are thinking, well, if they're flying around in space and they got these TIE fighters, why are they just, out flying them? They could just shoot them with the gunner station or the backup guns, right? Or the weapon system, right? Well, the guns were out. That was the problem. The weapon system was down. The only thing that worked, and I know what you guys are saying, well, what about that gun that came out when Darth Vader was walking towards the Falcon with the snowtroopers? Well, that was the emergency power gun. That is a gun when nothing else works. That gun will always, 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 always work. So the Falcon could be out of power. You could hit that thing, and it's your backup supply to emergency situations. That's why it's the emergency power gun. So that's a different gun. The main guns are out. The weapon system is out. So the Falcon is fuming it. It's like a broken car that is just pushing before the radiator explodes. That's what the Falcon's doing right now. So you've got that. The Rebel Alliance, they're in shambles. They're scattered across the galaxy. You got half of them over on one side and half of them over on the other side, and people just scattered because the Empire is showing up. That's why codename is called Empire Strikes Back, because the Empire comes down and they unleash an unholy force of havoc on the rebellion. So you're going, yay, when you see the original movie and they destroy the Death Star. Well, when that happened, the Empire said, forget these guys, let's hit them hard. And they went after them with everything, and they showed no mercy. So they took out a lot of the rebel forces, and then the rebellion gets scattered. And then we have something that, in a lot of movies, a lot of heroes and characters that are with the heroes that are also heroes, they end up kind of, fighting together in the movie and coming together and things like that. But in Empire, they get scattered. Han, Leia, well, actually, originally Leia was supposed to go with the rebellion, because Han Solo and Chewbacca were leaving the rebellion to go handle business with Jabba the Hutt. So they were going to leave. So they were headed one direction. Leia was headed towards the rebellion. So she was going another direction. And then Luke Skywalker, who's the main antagonist and hero, he was actually going on a whole nother mission to Dagobah to learn more about the Force after he survived almost freezing to death out in the cold of the planet Hoth. By the way, they're on this planet called Hoth. I don't mean to be all over the place, but they're on this, at the beginning of the movie, they're on this planet called Hoth, which is on my hat. It's all snow. It's colder than Sweden or any country you could think of in the middle of winter. Germany, whatever, Russia, it's colder than cold. And he ends up getting attacked by one of the snow creatures, and it kind of loss of blood, not really wrapped up right, and it doesn't matter anyway, because by the time he gets free, the temperature, it's getting night outside, it's becoming night, and it's getting colder and colder and colder. So he's freezing, to death out there. And Han Solo happens to find him and save him, but it's kind of cutting it close because you don't know if he's going to make it or not, because he's in some real bad shape. And that's when Han Solo does the famous, uses the lightsaber and cuts open the Tauntaun, which is very much like a camel, and puts Luke Skywalker inside the stomach of the dead carcass of the Tauntaun from the heat from that to keep him going as Han Solo builds a shelter. And that's kind of how the movie kind of kicks off. But from there, once Luke Skywalker, is healed in a Bacta tank, which is a healing tank. So if you guys have never seen it, I actually have, because I'm the action figure guy. So I've got a Bacta tank right here. So he was in something like this, exactly like this, and it heals his body. So once he gets out, boom, he's leading a team, because he now has the Rogue Squadron, which is his fighter pilot team. Cool name, too. And they're setting up an attack with speeders against AT-AT walkers. And like I said, the good guys are on the bare bones minimum. So these snow speeders they have are basic blasters, and they're not even the weaponry is not even strong enough to penetrate what they're going to have to fight. So they have to use these harpoon tow cables to wrap up the legs to survive the attack. If they could do it, because it's not an easy feat to you have to go around it in a circle and wrap up the legs, and that's not very easy to do. And they're getting slaughtered out there. And the rest, there's like ground troopers, they're just getting easily mowed over. And so the heroes end up going and leaving, and they're all split up. So Luke does end up on Dagobah, and he does meet Yoda, and they do begin to train, but not without some deep moments. It's not, oh yeah, here you go, I'm Yoda that would train you. No, he tests him out, and he sees what Luke Skywalker is kind of about. He's constantly testing him and constantly making him go through trials with his training and putting him in some really interesting situations to test out how Luke will receive the training and how he will react to what Yoda tests him with. There's the important scene where he rises his X-Wing out of the fire, not Luke, but Yoda, because Luke was supposed to do it. But he says, it's too big. And that's what Yoda says, size matters not. Look at me, judge me by my size, do you? And where your feelings and thoughts should be. For my ally is the Force, and a powerful ally it is. Life creates it. And he gets into it with Luke on a philosophical level. And pretty much Luke's just kind of looking at him like, I'm not getting any of this. And he tells him, you work the impossible. And that's pretty much Luke just kind of throwing the towel and giving up because he's just frustrated and he doesn't get it. The thing about Luke is the ultimate hero, but he's also a very flawed hero, in a lot of ways. He represents hope and light in doing what's right. But every hero has their tough time. So he's not necessarily flawed. Let me take that back. He's your basic guy, but he'll always do what's right at the end of the day, but he might get pulled into some time where he can't figure out everything and he needs help or he needs time to really think about it. But like I said, he always does what's right. So he's given up, and Yoda raises his X-Wing fighter out of the water like no problem. And Luke goes, I don't believe it. And Yoda tells him, that's why you failed. And Yoda also told him earlier, when Luke says, I won't fail you, see how that works? Then, he ended up kind of failing. But he tells him, when he says, I won't fail you, I'm not afraid, Yoda says, you will be. You will be. Because he's going to be tested. He has to face himself in the cave of the dark side, which it's an area that is powerful with the dark side, but it allows you to see certain visions depending how you walk in there. And it was pretty much a reflection of Luke saying, hey, if you walk down this path, many things can happen. That's the interesting thing about the original Star Wars trilogy, is it doesn't just lay it out for you like the good guy is going to do this and everything. It's like, no, there's many things that could happen. And Empire is that movie that really challenges you, because Luke's faced with the decision. Does he turn to the light side, which is what he wants to do, but the dark side is easier to mess with. The light side is hard to mess with and learn. So he could go either way, realistically. And on the other side of that coin, what ends up happening is he starts using the Force, and the Force starts to show him that his friends are in trouble in a place in the clouds. So now he's faced with the decision, which he doesn't really, he thinks about very quickly. He's like, of course, I've got to help him. I got to do this. And Yoda tells him, leave now, help him you could, but remember, you will destroy everything that they have fought and suffered for. So he's essentially telling him, look, everything you and your friends fought for could be completely messed up if you go there. Your friends, you might pretty much, you have to make a decision if you do or don't go. Now, Yoda's really telling him he needs to stay because it's a setup for Vader to seduce him to the dark side, which Obi-Wan appears and talks to him about it as well. And Luke still goes there, which, it's fine, but there's just a lot of consequences, and he will have to suffer a fate, which is very hard to take in when you really start thinking about it, because you watch the movie and sometimes you may not think about things, but when you start thinking about what happens in the movie, you're like, well, wait a minute. So he goes there, and because he does that, it kind of changes the outcome. The outcome may have gone a completely different way. So his friends may have not died and may have survived without his help, but because he went there and he did do that, the price is now he has to face Vader, not completely trained as a Jedi Knight, and Vader's very trained and knows what he's doing, but Luke has no idea what he's doing. He cannot control all his Force abilities yet. So he's kind of like a martial arts student who's facing some sort of high level master and just going, okay, here we go. That's pretty much what's happening. And you're kind of like, man, that outcome's not good. The stakes are pretty high on that one. It's not looking good for him. So Luke has to go there. By the way, before we get into that, Han Solo goes to the Noite system, to a place called Bespin, Cloud City. He has an old friend called Lando Calrissian that hangs out there. And Lando is a smuggler, very much like him, card player, gambler, scoundrel. Okay, now I'm going to get into the character of Lando for a minute. I love that character. Very interesting character. A lot of people say you betrayed Han Solo and he's a bad guy and he's a double agent. Let me explain something to you guys. In the book, it's made very well clear that Lando didn't have a choice because Vader showed up there prior to them getting there and said, look, here's what you're going to do. This is what's going to happen. And you don't have a choice because your options are either you do what I say and maybe you'll live, or you don't do what I say and I'll kill you here and I'll put all your people in slavery. And Cloud City, if I remember right, I think they had about 8 to 10 million people living there. So he was responsible for all those people. And in the original deal, Han Solo was not even in it. They just wanted Luke Skywalker. That's all Vader wanted. And that's what he says, I'm altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further. And that's why he and Lando kind of have the arguments that they do, because that was not part of the plan. Now it's give Han Solo to Boba Fett. Now it's, well, let's freeze him in carbonite, see if this stuff works. Then Boba Fett can take him, if he survives, and do what he needs to do. And then we'll reset it for Luke, And now it was Leia and Chewie get to stay on Cloud City and live with Lando. Now it's, okay, now take them back to my ship, and they're not staying here. And maybe we'll leave an area for Empire garrison to hang out here and watch over things, which means slavery may be coming in problems. So the deal kept changing. And that's the big thing about Empire Strikes Back, is it's filled with surprises. You don't know what's going to happen. You want to say, oh, yeah, the good guys are going to win. But like I said, they don't win. At the end of the movie, they barely escape. They barely get away. They barely hang in there the entire movie. And like I said earlier, Luke fights Vader, loses his hand, and finds out the stunning big event in all Star Wars history, that Darth Vader is Luke's father. When he was told that his father was killed by Darth Vader and was a good man and did things right, and was, everyone loved him and that sort of thing was going on. And in reality, that he's actually Darth Vader. So he turned to the dark side and he killed his own fellow brother and Jedi and ruled the galaxy with the Emperor and became the force of evil instead of a force of good. And that was the reality Luke had to face. And that was part of what Yoda and Obi-Wan were saying, was like, not only did you lose your hand, but you found this out. And the emotional breakdown and the thought that was going through his head, I mean, who knows? I mean, it's heavy to think that your father is the downfall of an entire galaxy. The reason why everybody's having a hard time in life. That's a lot to take on for a young guy. And Luke has to learn. I call Empire Strikes Back the learning young man's movie. It really tests you out. You know, you can do everything right. And in life, sometimes you're just thrown a wrench. And Luke Skywalker was definitely thrown a wrench. I know a lot of people always complain about Luke saying, oh, he's not as cool as Han Solo. You know, that sort of thing. You know, I beg to differ. He's very different from Han Solo. Luke is the everyday hero, the one that always does what is right, and will constantly lay down his life for his friends and the cause that he believes in. And that's what makes Luke Skywalker special, is that no matter what he encounters, he will always fight for what is right. If it costs everything, including his own life, he will lay it down for his friends without hesitation. And that's what makes the difference between Han and Luke, really. Not that Han Solo wouldn't do some things, because he does have a heart, but Han is still kind of skeptical about a few things. And he's not a Force user at all. He's not Force sensitive. So Luke Skywalker's kind of on a different plane. He's got a lot more responsibility than Han Solo could ever have. You know, he's responsible for the outcome of everything that's going to happen in this war. You know, it sits on Luke Skywalker's shoulders, because if he succeeds, he could take out all the dark forces of the Empire, put a stop to that, and change the outcome of a lot of things. If he loses, it could cost everything. And that's the difference between Luke and Han. Han doesn't have to, not that he doesn't care, but he doesn't have that responsibility. Vader is not his father, and he is not destined to do a great many things, you know, like Luke is, like Luke's supposed to do. And he's supposed to change the game, and he's supposed to unite the rebellion, and he's supposed to do different things. So anyway, this is the first video. I'm going to start video 2 here, but I got to stop this. Please tune in, and I'm sorry if I'm rambling. There's a lot to remember. But yeah, here we go. Thanks, guys.